sponsored by Hydro Flask. We'd like to thank Hydro Flask for, and I'd like to introduce to our facilitator this evening. Our facilitator this evening is Kim McNally. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hi, it's great to be with you all this evening. I'm happy to work with our panelists and provide informative tips, knowledge that you'll need to extend your healthy habits into this holiday season, into the new year. I have been at Duke for many years. I started as an undergraduate in the late 90s, left for a while to pursue graduate school, and then I've been back here for about 15 years teaching. I teach exercise physiology, exercise and mental health, and a variety of activity classes. So I really have worn a lot of different hats in the exercise and fitness sphere, from doing personal training to teaching classes to doing research. And I'm really excited about working with our panelists today to talk about not just physical activity as a healthy habit, but all the important self-care healthy habits we should be trying to maintain, especially during these challenging times. In my personal life, I have 3 kids from adolescents to toddlers. So really, just like most people here, we're balancing a lot in my household, and I'm always looking for great tips on how we can try to have a more healthy and kind of sustainable environment in our household, in our relationship. So I'm pleased to introduce our panelists today to have that discussion. First, I would like to introduce to you Tom Sigethy. He is our director of Do Well, and I will let him give you his background and all those important titles. Thanks, Tom. You can go ahead, unmute.
Helps to unmute, doesn't it? Thanks, Kim. I'm Tom Sigethy, the director of Do Well. I've been with Duke about 12 years now, and Do Well is our health promotion side of the house at Duke. So we help students to navigate how to mitigate risk, how to promote their own wellness, and then how to give back to the community once they've figured all the wellness components out. You're muted, Kim.
You got me. Thanks, Tom. Our next panelist is Leanne Garstecki. She's our Fitness and Wellness Director here in Rec and PE.
All right. Hey, everyone. As Kim said, I'm the Director of Fitness and Wellness for Duke Rec and PE. I have been at Duke for a little over 5 years now. Originally from Wisconsin, big Wisconsin girl. So fan of the Midwest, and now a fan of North Carolina. But yeah, I've been here. We do a lot with, everything fitness, group fitness, personal training, small group programs, but we also do some more wellness-based programs as well, especially with a lot of our female students. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Leanne. Our next panelist is Kara Lawson. She's, of course, our women's basketball coach. We're pleased to have you here, Kara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I guess just a little over 3 months for me at Duke. So very, very new, still figuring a lot of things out, but very excited to be here and really enjoying working with our players.
Kara, it looks like you have a great view up in the tower. Are you over? Yeah, that's a cool nighttime view from Cameron, right? Couldn't be a better place on campus.
Oh, no, I'm at home. I'm at home.
Okay, well, that's a great view from home. Our next panelist is Benjamin Turtis. He is from the Massage Collective, the Endurance Collective, which does, among other things, massage therapy, sports training. I'd love to hear more about that collective, Benjamin, and some of because you're our community representatives, and so some of the ways you kind of reached out into the community with your work.
Yeah, the Endurance Collective is kind of a collective of sports medicine practitioners right here in Durham. I myself I coach for USA Cycling, and I was a retired pro mountain biker, got into massage therapy and strength training. So we do kind of a little bit of everything here. We've got running coaches, massage therapy, corrective exercise, yoga, kind of the whole gamut of sports medicine type stuff outside of what you'd see in a physical therapy clinic or a hospital.
Great to have you, Benjamin. It's interesting to be in so many different areas of health and wellness. So glad to have you all in this panel today. We are going to start with a very broad question. I'm going to throw it toward Tom. It's important that we establish our topic for today and kind of operationalize this idea of healthy habits. So Tom, if you could start for us, what in your words is a healthy habit and why are they important?
I mean, healthy habit, anything that's going to really promote your wellness in general. I think often we're taught that if you exercise and eat right, then you're well. But there's a lot more to it. Whether or not you're taking care of yourself emotionally, spiritually, all of it connects. If you think about the time that you can kind of talk yourself out of going to the gym, it's all about the mood and how do you navigate that emotion in order to keep the whole body, the whole person well.
Yeah, great point. And I think most of us can kind of recognize what healthy exercise, well, hopefully recognize what healthy exercise looks like. And we can talk more about that. And healthy nutrition, obviously somewhat controversial, but we'll talk about that. But tell me a little more about some of those other areas. You mentioned spiritual, maybe you said environmental. Like, what does it look like to have a healthy habit in those areas?
The way we talk about it in Do Well a lot of times is when you talk about your environment and what's around you and how you interact with it. Does your environment give you positive energy or does it really detract from it? Is it stress filled or can you rejuvenate in the environment that you're in? Trying to really see that we respond and interact. Like a number of years back, not really that far back, Duke was covered with construction everywhere. And if students are hearing construction and jackhammers and construction trucks everywhere and all that noise, how does that impact their personhood? And if you think about where do you go to be in your happiest place or your safest space, what are the elements of that place and why does it give you this positive feeling and feedback of how you respond to things in life?
Yeah, that's a great example of our physical environment from, the look, the sound. But what about our social environment? What are some of the elements in our social environment that are going to be important for maintaining healthy habits?
I think that we all really need to look at, are we getting as well as giving in our social situations? Students often talk about being committed to a student organization or a group. And I think where they struggle is how do they tell when enough is enough, or if they've given too much or they're not getting anything in return. They don't want to give up on a student group. And what we try to get people to see is there's a symbiotic relationship. Is my wellness growing because of a social connection? And am I also giving to that social connection? So there should be a two-way highway kind of thing. It should not be only in one direction.
Those are great points. And I think that's a really nice way of rounding out a variety of healthy habits we'll consider tonight, from, again, the exercise, the nutrition, these kind of very obvious physical habits, as well as our emotional habits, our social habits. And then, like you mentioned, even the physical environment that we put ourselves in. It seems like we don't always have a choice about that. You can't control construction, but like Tom said, we can go to a place where we have some quiet or where we have some time to kind of unplug, get away from our device, if you will. We just have to choose those habits, lock up your phone, whatever you need to do. So thanks for kind of rounding out that description of some different areas of healthy habits. I want to next throw it over to Leanne. In your area, of course, fitness, there's a lot of literature out there about what it takes to create lasting healthy habits with exercise. So in your experience, what are those important factors in having lasting healthy habits with exercise? And what have you personally found to be successful with your clients in personal training?
Yeah, so I think first, whenever you're talking about habits, you'll see a lot of things thrown out there about how long it takes to form a habit, right? And I think something I looked at, the average is 66 days, but it can range from 18 to 200 and some. So I think an important takeaway with that is not to pay attention to how long, because it's going to vary. There's so many variables that go into that. So paying attention to the variables, how dedicated are you to your goal? What is the perceived benefit of that goal? Those are what's going to play a role for that. So I think it's being realistic. And in fitness, that's always a big one, especially with trainers. People come in with very unrealistic goals, and it's okay to have those, but then we have to set some mini goals along the way. Because when you start to achieve those, you become more motivated, right, to keep going. So I think that, that the realistic, the perceived benefit you're going to get from achieving it, which could be different from the actual benefit. So you kind of got to keep both of those in mind. I think journaling about your goals, is really important to kind of keep coming back to it, but also talking, when you journal, it's not just writing what that goal is, it's how do you feel about it? When you did something to work towards that goal for the day, how did you feel afterwards? Because, and this will come up later, but when you're struggling, that's when you can go back to that. And I do video journals now because, we have phones, and sometimes I'll come home and just, sounds weird, but talk to myself, right? And go back and look at that. Then the two that I find to be the most important is, how much do you enjoy it? A lot of times, and I think about food wise as well. So nutrition and with fitness, a lot of people do things, but they don't do them because they enjoy them. They do them because they think they have to. And in life, sometimes we got to do things we don't want to do or don't like to do. I don't like to run. I don't want to run unless it's playing basketball. That's the only time I want to do it. But I still do it every once in a while. But I make sure that everything else I enjoy. And that's what you tell people is, don't do something if you hate it, because it's not going to last very long. Find something that you really, truly enjoy. And then lastly, focus on positive goals. And what I mean by that is, and it's easy to talk with nutrition on this. A lot of people, okay, I'm not going to eat that. I don't want to eat that. Flip it. When I used to do a lot more nutritional counseling, that was the number one tip that people told me helped them, was when I said, okay, write a list of what you're going to do. I am going to drink this much water. I'll keep it simple. I am going to have this many vegetables. If by the time you do that, your brain has less time to focus on negative and things that maybe you don't want to be doing. But it's the same thing with physical activity or any area of wellness. A simple one would be, I'm going to go home and I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go home and make dinner, instead of, I'm not going to watch TV when I go home. I'm not going to lay down. The more you flip that in your brain and focus on the positive, I think the more successful you're going to be.
I really like that, the idea of positive goals instead of trying to restrict ourselves, which can be very difficult to find the discipline, but also can create a lot of negative feelings, which makes it harder to be realistic. So with those positive goals, you mentioned some nice ways to flip it with nutrition, with exercise, but what are some other elements within positive goals? We think about SMART goal setting to help you stay positive and, like you said, realistic. What are some good ways of keeping positive goals?
So if you mean like different areas than fitness and nutrition?
Any of them. I think when I hear individuals' goals, like you mentioned, a lot of times they're not very realistic, and they're also really quantitative, which is always good, this many vegetables or whatever. But to kind of harkening back to what Tom was talking about, rarely do we see positive goals about the environment we put ourselves in. So maybe for exercise, having a goal of finding a workout partner or finding a good music soundtrack. And so have you seen any other factors with positive goal setting that really seems to add to just the usual, this many calories or this many pounds?
Yeah, actually, so one of the big things that I've really tried to hammer and switch with my trainers when we work with clients is to do more feeling or performance-based goals, to be honest, is the number one. Not about aesthetics. Get away from that, because that's fleeting. That's really fluid, right? As a female, we can talk about, hey, it changes every month. We have times where we don't look the same, where we put on weight like that. If you just pay attention to that, you can't hold on to that. But if you have a performance goal, I always encourage people, what do you want to do? And then we may have to play around with some things. And then you may find something or you may see something. I want to be able to do that. Okay, cool. Now we can work towards that. And that's something that is, achievable and that they can hold on to. And to me, that's positive. I also think that, like you said, the workout buddies, finding something you enjoy, that's going to help so much. And I think, again, that's a positive thing, because in a day when you wake up and you're like, I don't want to go work out, I don't want to do this. If it's something you enjoy, like I think about kickboxing. If I know I'm going to go punch a bag, I'm like, all right, let's go do this. It's just a lot more positive.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And we're going to get to the rest of our panelists with this next question. So we'll get to hear from everyone. But before I move on, I just wanted to put a plug for some of my work for my exercise and mental health class, and kind of bring up Leanne's point about aesthetic goals. There's lots of research now on the effects of exercise for depression and anxiety, improving body image. But one of the interesting moderators is that if we have aesthetic and weight loss goals only, or if those weight loss and appearance goals are super strong, then exercise actually has a negative effect on our mental health. We see an increase in depression and anxiety, and we see a decrease in positive body image. So to Leanne's point, it's really important to have realistic goals as well as kind of functional goals about performance, and not just these weight loss and aesthetic goals that we all have. If those become too powerful, it can really be challenging for our mental health. So moving on to some of our other panelists, from each of you, I'd love to hear one habit you really believe in that requires the least effort, but makes the greatest difference in getting your day started. Let's start with you, Kara. What's that one habit that you just really helps you get your day started and makes a big difference? Gotcha. There you go.
Mine is workout. So
Yeah.
I wake up early and usually around 5, and then go to the gym and work out. And I enjoy that time to myself because it's I do some of my best thinking during that time, and it's good to be able to relax and not have anybody there. And so then being alone with my thoughts on a daily basis. Most of my day is spent with a lot of people coming in and out and talking in different conversations, and talking with anywhere from 50 to 100 people a day, depending on where they fit within our program, where they fit as an attachment to our program, and certainly obviously recruiting future players. So there's a lot of hats that you wear as a coach at a major program. And so being able to find time alone is really important for me. So that's how I start my day. And like I said, really do some of my best thinking during that time.
Thanks for sharing that. I can relate. I love exercising in the morning, and I love exercising alone. Our previous panelists talked about, the social aspect, and that's great. But I, being an introvert, really can agree with what you're saying, like having that quiet time to get in your brain, do some problem solving, gear up for the day and stuff. Carrie, with all the different hats you wear, do you find that during your workouts that you kind of tune out and use that as kind of time for centering, or do you actually tackle some problems in your head while you're doing it?
So I don't want to act like I'm super nuanced, but it just depends on like what I feel, like the vibrations I feel like within myself when I wake up. Sometimes I feel the need to work out something complicated in work life. Sometimes I feel the need to just have it be centering. So I can't say it's the same always. And I definitely use music to help with that. And again, that depends on what effect I'm trying to have on myself. Will depend on what the playlist or the artist or the sound is.
Yeah, that's a great point, that music can help us kind of with the centering, but maybe silence or, for me, going outside helps me with, problem solving and getting more creative and stuff. Thanks for sharing that. Benjamin, how about you? What's one habit that you think requires the least effort, but makes a big difference?
Kara totally stole mine. I ride every day, and that's a big part of like what centers me and grounds me and allows me to prepare for my day. Especially when I ride in the woods, it's something that requires total focus. So it's something that allows me to reset and really, if I take my mind off the trail, I'm gonna hit a tree. So I'm not really thinking about what's going on around me in the world or politics or whatever. I'm very present. And I like that exercise in the morning because it does require me to start my day off being very present. And so much of my day is, meeting with this athlete about a problem or following somebody else and what their form looks like, or getting into some sort of injury issue. And this just allows me to kind of put that aside for a little bit, not think about it, and really just focus on myself and my well-being and my fitness. And it's also, the riding around here is beautiful. I get to see some beautiful things in the morning. This morning we were riding, we saw a pair of bald eagles out over the trail, and a lot of people don't get to see that stuff in the morning, and it's stuff that we just kind of miss a lot of times because we're thinking about other things. So that's kind of my thing in the morning.
Yeah, that's a great contrast where you can choose a setting that's going to take all of your focus, so you can't get into that kind of in the woods thinking about things and not even seeing what's around you. I like the idea of, like you mentioned, a really complicated course, maybe with some roots and sharp turns and stuff, or maybe a complex dance routine, or a really technical weight training routine, or something that where your whole focus is on internal, like how your body is functioning, navigating through space. And I think it's a great point that nature really helps with that. It can help you kind of tune out, but it also can help you really tune in when you're trying to navigate nature. So those are some great tips. We've heard morning workouts. There's a lot of research supporting that, not because it's better for you necessarily metabolically or anything like that, but we're just more likely to fit it in. We also heard nature, exercising out in nature if you're trying to either tune in or tune out, depending on the person. How about moving it to you, Tom? What's your one habit that requires the least effort? If you could unmute.
I always think I'm going to remember to unmute.
I stink at it too.
I would say that for the morning, what kind of gets my head in a good frame of mind, honestly, is journaling. I have some kind of daily meditation pages so that I would read, and then just kind of let my hand go. I journal old school with literally pen and paper, not with a computer. The tactile, I think, makes a big difference. Similar to what Benjamin said, it gets me in the present moment. And that present moment is the most serene and happiest moment. If I'm living in the past, I'm usually living in worry and regret. And if I'm living in the future, I'm living in fear. So anything I can do to kind of get my mindset into the present moment is going to be the healthiest place to be. The journaling factor, what I find is it kind of empties my mind. It gets everything on the page, and a lot of times things will show up on the page that I didn't even realize were spinning around in my head. And to let that out, put it on paper, set it aside, and then start the day fresh.
That sounds amazing. I've been wanting to try something like that for a long time, and I always tell myself I don't have time. Like I get up in the morning and I gotta go, get the kids out the door. How do you carve out that time for your journaling?
Well, my kids are a little bit older. When they're home, they're teenagers and then young 20s. But once they hit that teenager range, they don't like to get up early, so it's easy to get up before them. Grab a cup of coffee, have my time of quiet in the house, or sit out in the garden in the backyard, and just start writing and just kind of be in that present moment.
Yeah. And Leanne, you also mentioned journaling, different type of journaling, but for you, is your journaling kind of whatever's in your brain that moment, or is it like, do you have a certain theme, like a gratitude each day or something like that?
Yeah, not really in the moment journaling, more about things I want to accomplish, and not necessarily in the day, but what are some of my goals for that month? Usually it's a monthly basis. I don't do it on the daily. I wish I did, but I don't. But yeah, listing out things that I want to accomplish and making sure that the things that I'm doing are in line with those. So that's why I do it. I kind of go back and like, okay, is everything that I'm doing kind of line up with what those goals are? So that's my journaling.
I appreciate you sharing that, because it's really different from what Tom's talking about, and shows you that you can attack it kind of different ways and have different benefits from that, from, like you said, kind of moving forward in your goals to just centering yourself for the day, like Tom mentioned. Thank you all for sharing that habit. Those are some great ones. Moving on, I'm going to throw it back to Kara. How do you sustain motivation? Your goals are so big for yourself and for your team, that how do you sustain that motivation and stick to those big goals, even in the face of setbacks, which we all have?
I think for me, what helps is experience, having set goals before and having succeeded with some of them, having failed with some of them, and understanding the process that it takes, at least in our sport, to achieve a big goal. It's a long process. It takes a lot of time, and the road is never straight. It has a lot of unexpected twists and turns, and so being mindful of that, understanding that, when something is put in the path that might affect motivation or might affect optimism. If just looked at it in that moment of just something being in the path, then sure, motivation could wane, but just keeping the mind on the bigger picture and understanding that there's a process, and that growth is something that is challenging and uncomfortable, and you have to go through that in order to reach the end. So I think for me personally, just the experience of having done that through my whole career as a player, I understand when I'm coaching a team now full of young people that have the same goals, some of the same goals that I had as a player, right? That's an experiential wisdom component that you have that allows you to see things a little bit uniquely, to understand exactly what they may be going through, or exactly how to help them from a motivating standpoint.
Yeah, that's great. This idea of growth mindset, right? That if we go into a goal viewing it as a challenge and viewing small failures as opportunities for growth, then we're really going to keep moving forward with that. Kara, if I could ask you a follow-up question, how do you communicate that to your athletes, your student athletes? Like you said, you've been through it, you know what they're going through, but we all know that for younger people, it feels like it's the first time that anyone's ever experienced these challenges. So how do you get in kind of their brain and help them sustain that motivation when they're having challenges? What do you tell them?
Well, if it's a challenge that I've gone through, I think being able to relate a personal story and how you navigated it, and what maybe you did well, or what maybe you wish you'd have done differently. We don't always handle the situations perfectly, and sometimes looking back, we wish we would have done something differently. And so I think relaying personal anecdotes is something that if I feel like is in analogous situation, I will use that. As far as just trying to help them, I think just attacking things head on is really important. I think being direct and transparent with players is really important. Basketball players, I found this to be true when I was in the NBA with the Celtics. I found to be true with our players here. They are very, very good at detecting BS, right? So they understand when you're trying to put one over on them, or how you're presenting something is not in an authentic way. So it's a futile attempt to try and do that. And I think the best way is to be honest, direct, transparent with players. Get right at you get right at the point that you want to get at with them, and then work with them to figure out a solution. To beat around the bush, or to try and mask it, or to try and pretend it's not there, like that's not going to be very successful. So I just try to deal with our players in an honest, direct, and transparent way. And I think that so they know that's where I'm coming from when I'm talking to them. And then we seem to be able to move now we're not playing a game, right? It's not like, okay, well, I'm gonna say this and then she's gonna say this, and then no, like I don't play games. Like, what? Okay, here's what you need. All right, let's try this, and then let's move forward. And I think if you make honest attempts consistently, then that's going to help with the trust that you have and the foundation that you have in a relationship. I mean, really, it comes down to relationships, authentic and meaningful relationships with people. With this, it's player coach, but it's very hard to help someone, or it's very hard for someone to allow you to help them without an authentic and meaningful relationship there, right? It has to exist. Well, how do you get an authentic and meaningful relationship? It takes time, and you have to put the time in with somebody to be able to build that. And so I try to put as much time as I can in with our players, and talking to them one-on-one, and talking to them in practice, and talking to them in small group settings, so that we can continue to build that, so that the words coming from me are going to have a little bit more weight if we have that relationship.
Yeah, that sounds great. I know that transparency and that authentic style is really important for team cohesion, right? So getting your players to trust you and getting them to trust each other an important part of being a team, but also of winning, right? Like when you're in a challenging situation, playing against a challenging team, for example, knowing that there's that trust and team cohesion is going to be really important. It sounds like you said, you've had so much experience with that your players will really look to you to be able to kind of manage them through that. I want to again welcome you here to Duke. I apologize I didn't do that earlier on, and you talk about establishing that relationship with your student athletes. Even though you're new here, I think one way that's great is for you to have those individual conversations with them so they can get to know you. Have you had a chance to do that since you just started?
Yeah, I've had, I think, at least 2 one-on-ones with every player, at least a half hour long, some longer than that, just depends. Some I've had more with, my players, I try to tell them all the time they can come up and see me whenever they want. And so multiple players have done that. So just more than anything, try to be as accessible as I can, and try to meet at least once a month individually with every player. And if they want to talk about basketball, we can, but that's not the point of the meeting, right? The point of the meeting, unless they want it to be, if they want to talk about it. So like I said, we're a couple months in. I've met at least twice, sometimes more with every player, and we'll continue to do that as we move through the season. I think it's just important to have an open line of communication and to continue to help them feel more comfortable. Some players it's more intimidating than others to be in a one-on-one setting with a coach. And so hopefully for the ones that is not as comfortable for, the repetition of it will allow them to feel a little better.
Yeah, there's some great themes there. And if I could bring back with healthy habits, that idea of accountability, authentic relationships is going to be really important with healthy habits as well. With that in mind, Ben, can you tell me a little bit about how you keep your clients accountable? How do you recommend that they track their habits? How do you check in on them, or how do they check in on you, kind of like Kara was talking about?
So with the kind of e-training now, and we deal mostly with endurance athletes here, and so a lot of the athletes we coach use apps like Strava and programs like Training Peaks, where when I'm working with an athlete, I'm actually building them a daily plan that essentially goes to their phone if they're a remote athlete. And I'm kind of old school. My coach basically sent me a calendar with handwritten workouts day by day on it. And so I personally like to have that visual cue that's like on the refrigerator with a magnet. And if I did it all, I check it off the list and move on to the next day. The electronic version of that I find doesn't work as well for me, but works very well for a lot of the athletes I work with. And it cues me in each day. I can see, okay, I have a pro racer that lives in California, and he didn't do his strength workout because of whatever reason, but he did do his rides. So I'm able to check in with him and ask him, hey, what happened? Why'd you miss this workout? And have a conversation with him. I think a lot of it ties back into making sure that there are goals for the season. Goals to check off for each rider, runner, whatever athlete, because that's really important. A key component in holding people accountable is having those goals. And we talked about kind of having some that were a little bit lofty, maybe a stretch goal, and some that are a little bit more low-hanging fruit. And it's good to have some of those low-hanging fruit goals early on so that you can build up confidence in an athlete. That's something I really like to do when I first start working with somebody.
Yeah, that's a great point. We used to call them the easy goals, and we knew our coach was doing them, like trying to have that success early on in your training so you can build on it. I like that idea. With all the technology that's available today, Ben, you mentioned Strava, but what else is out there that people listening can use to help maintain accountability? Maybe there's a social component or even a competitive component that they can use to sustain motivation.
Well, there's, Strava's been both good and bad especially during COVID. I think a lot of people, it's caused a lot of social anxiety. People going out and competing against themselves, and then other athletes are checking in and comparing themselves to that. And as a coach, I've had a lot of conversations with athletes saying, "Hey, you're comparing apples to oranges with this athlete because she might be training for this, and you're not training for that." So I think there can be a danger with device or apps like Strava, but there's also, I mean, Facebook, Instagram, there's all kinds of challenges going on right now. You see like push-up challenges and a big thing in cycling right now is called Everesting, where riders will find a specific hill and they'll go up and down it until they've reached the essential elevation of Mount Everest. So there's all kinds of stuff like that going on right now, and honestly, as a coach, it's kind of hard to manage in the endurance world, because there's some fragile egos out there that are seeing some of this stuff and being like, oh, well, I need to be doing that, and it's not necessarily germane to what they need to be doing as athletes.
Yeah, technology is great. Social media is great when it comes to connecting, but it really can be dangerous if you don't, like we've talked about previously, have pretty realistic goals, know where you are in your training or in your healthy habits, your behavior changes. So really kind of staying in your own lane and being mindful of what's a healthy amount of exercise or a healthy amount of training or a healthy approach to nutrition. All those can be really hard with how connected we are these days. And so I just want to quickly jump on top of that before we move on and ask this question of how do you ensure that your athletes are staying healthy or like not getting overly compulsive with their approach to their training or their nutrition?
I think conversation is really important. I require all the athletes that I coach, we have at least one weekly conversation on the phone and not via text message or email or anything like that, because I think tone of voice and how excited or down they might be is really important. It is really, like Kara talked a lot about relationships with her individual athletes, and that really is, I think, the whole game. I mean, you develop individual relationships with each athlete and you learn how to manage them differently. What might be a carrot for one athlete, maybe a stick for another athlete. And so, and it might be a little bit different for me because I'm dealing with them on an individual level as opposed to a team level. But certainly, I think having conversations and getting to know certain personalities and being compassionate with those personalities, understanding specifically right now that we're living in an unprecedented time and things are tough. And, sometimes things just don't happen because they don't happen. And I stress a lot of times that, be kind to yourself. It's hard out there right now, and athletics are not easy. We don't get into these things because they're easy. But sometimes you really do have to give yourself a break.
Yeah. Both Kara and Ben have brought up some great points about the importance of having a coach, a mentor, that leader friend relationship that can help you stay on track, stay motivated, but also keep perspective, right? And not comparing yourself to things that are not relevant. So I wanted to throw out a question kind of to wrap it up for everyone here is how can individuals maintain healthy habits, not just in exercise and nutrition, but including spiritual healthy habits, healthy environments, by seeking out others. In other words, how can we find the social connections, the mentors we need to sustain our healthy habits in those different areas of health and wellness? Let me start with Tom. We haven't heard from you in a while. How can you help individuals connect with others to maintain their healthy habits?
There's a lot of people at Duke that people can connect with for sure, whether it's faculty or staff across the institution. But really trying to, for one, put yourself out there to send an email and to connect, to talk about something if you want to or need to. rather than, you know, a lot of us introverts will go inside and just get very quiet, and not necessarily share what's going on with us. And I think in this time with the pandemic and everything else happening, there's so much even more sense of isolation for people, that we have to be very active and intentional about reaching out, and just to have conversations with people, you know, in order to, whether you, if, for example, if you go into the wellness center and you've got all different centers in there that do different activities, but just to touch base and figure out who is it that I can connect with. In Do Well, you know, everybody there is more than willing to sit down and meet with students, whether it's virtual or not, but to just go through what are some of the goals, what are the pieces people are wondering about, how can they explore things. We talk about, you mentioned spiritual, we talk about spiritual elements of wellness. And the way we define that is what about life is outside of our own domain that we don't have control over. And in a lot of ways, I think we're all getting in touch with that with this pandemic that we don't necessarily have control over. Like we can choose to do prevention techniques with the pandemic. And then we have to be satisfied with that's the kind of work that we can do with it. The only other pieces are building out on all of this wellness behavior that we could be doing on a daily basis. Often when I'm talking with students and they come in, a lot of times they'll come in because they're really struggling with things. And we try to flip the script similar to what Leanne was talking about with the food, but we're doing it also just with schedules and stress levels. Rather than scheduling a class and then all your social activity and all the things you want to do to put on your resume and then figure out where you're going to eat and how you're going to sleep, do it in reverse. How much sleep do you need to perform at your optimal level? When do you need to eat in order to accomplish that energy? Then add in your classes and all of your different routines you want to be doing. And it makes life easier to flip it in that way because you're putting yourself and your own self-care before everything else in your priority list.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's equating it to, I talk about it with the students a lot about maintaining a car. Like we have to get oil changes, we have to get regular maintenance, we have to fill up the gas tank. We can choose not to and drive as far as we want to. Eventually the car is going to burn out and die, and we're going to be stuck someplace and probably invest a lot more money in fixing it. Either way we're spending on it. It all depends how we want to do it. Do we do it in little pieces on a daily basis to make sure that we're sustained and we're functioning really well? Or do we wait till everything feels like it's falling apart and then get help?
That's a great analogy. And I love that idea with scheduling. We are all overscheduled. So the idea of scheduling the self-care first, the morning exercise, the meditation, the spiritual times, and then, you know, if you have time for class, homework, of course you need to find time, but do you need to take 5.5 classes or, you know, take on that extra project at work? Maybe, maybe not, but making sure the self-care is scheduled in there first. Leanne, how about for you? How do you help students find mentors, find those social connections that can help them sustain healthy habits?
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to something Ben said about being kind to yourself, because I actually had that written down to say, because especially with everything that's going on in the world right now, a lot of the conversations I've had with students over the summer when we jump on Zoom calls it's okay to have a bad day. Everyone's having them. Don't let people fool you. Everyone's struggling right now. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we try to fight that all the time and say, I can't have a bad day. And so what I found early on with being at home was, okay, let me try this out. Let me allow myself to have a bad day. And that means something different probably for everybody. But, you know, have that day where I just want to lay on the couch. I'm going to watch TV. I'm not doing anything. Wake up the next day and say, okay, do better than yesterday. And what I found was that not only did I do better, but I was back to pretty much normal. And I think it's giving yourself that grace. And so I was trying to tell students that all summer, like, it's okay to not be okay. Now, if it goes on, obviously, then we need to reach out. There's something more going on, but to have a day every once in a while, that's perfectly normal. But to get to, you know, your question is, I think that, you know, finding people that have similar interests. So on campus, obviously there's tons of clubs and organizations, things that you find joy in. I think finding a mentor within that is great, because you're going to get so many more benefits out of that. And you know, people who are in those roles, make sure that you understand that that mentorship role. I'm part of a great program on campus, or prior to this year, I was for the last 4, Penny Pilgrim mentorship program for women. And, it's a great place to find those students to mentor. I should have said this earlier. I should give a shout out. I'm also the club women's basketball coach, and some of my girls I think are on. So hi, ladies. But we jumped on this summer for a few calls and had that same conversation and just talked. And every time we jump on now, because obviously we weren't allowed to have a season. Hey, how are you doing? How's everybody doing? And I hope they know that I'm actually asking and caring. But I think Kara hit on that. Be genuine, and hopefully it is.
Yeah. Kara, so we've heard from you on this topic. Do you have anything else that you want to add in terms of helping mentor the people you work with, the people you're coaching?
Well, I think it's important, we obviously have a group of players, and then we have staff, and our staff is really diverse. So we have people as young as 25 and people, as old as, late 50s. So it's a big group, men, women, different races, everything. So in a staff standpoint, where it's a little bit different than a player-coach relationship, the relationships are still really important, right? The buy-in still very important, especially when you're leading a group of people. And so that emphasis remains the same for me. From a staff standpoint, I try to be really tuned into what their goals are. Most people, not everyone, but most people are not sitting in the job that they're going to spend like the rest of their life in, or sitting in the job that is their dream job. Some of us are lucky that we are, right? But not everybody is. And so people are on a journey to something else. And I think it's really important when you're a leader of a staff that you're in tune with that, and that you're focused on equipping the people in your staff with the things that they will need for their next step in their journey, or for their ultimate step in their journey, and not hoarding them, right? Not just keeping them to yourself, but being able to give them opportunities to showcase what they can do, give them opportunities to grow, and then be okay with losing them to something that's better for them. And I think that's really important as you interact in a workspace, that you're in tune with what people want to do. Now, you won't always be able to craft something perfect for that, because they do have a job to do for you, right? They have a job description. So you can't always, whet their appetite for what they want to do down the road, but there's certainly opportunities to find ways that you can bring them along with you when you're doing something. You can give them responsibilities that are not right under them, but that may be growing them towards something that they want to do. And so that's something I just try to be mindful of with all members of our staff, in conversation of what's their ultimate goal, what do they want to do, or maybe this is their dream job and they just want to grow and improve within the job. And so that's where I look at, where it's a little bit different than players, right? It's a little bit different relationship than players, but we all have coworkers, or some of us have a group of coworkers that we're tasked with leading. And I think it's important you're in tune with what they're doing.
Yeah. I love the way you talk about finding out how they want to grow. So when it comes to healthy habits or career goals, being a advocate for those people we're connecting with, helping identify what their goals are, what their needs are, and then meeting them there, rather than competing, or like you said, trying to hold them down, or keep them in that role, keep them from growing. So whether it's, like I said, career-wise or in our healthy habits, it's really important to have these social connections, to have these mentors, these kind of cheerleaders, if you will, but also ones that are healthy, right? That are kind of nurturing your goals and nurturing your habits, and not those that are compromising your goals. And so, as Tom mentioned, there's a lot of professionals here at Duke that can play that role, but there's also, like Leanne talked about with her her students and care with her athletes and her staff, been all of your clients. Like there's so many different ways we can find those social connections. And furthermore, we can be a mentor to someone else and we can be a mentee of someone else. So understanding our own role in that kind of social hierarchy, if you will, that we can both mentor and mentee people in supporting healthy habits. So we've talked about a lot of strategies, a lot of different kind of factors with healthy habits, from the types of behaviors we do with exercise, nutrition, and journaling, to the types of settings, time of day, who we surround ourselves with, what resources and what technology we have available. So there's lots of layers to maintaining healthy habits. And I want to wrap up by giving each of you kind of a 30 seconds to give us one piece of advice. Let's focus on those big goals, right? We talked about progressive goals, but what's one 30-second piece of advice that each of you would have to help people really shoot for the big goal that might be years off, helping them stay true to that goal? I'll start with you, Tom. What's that 30-second piece of advice for the, those long-term goals, whether it be training for a marathon or, changing someone's major, or, all different types of healthy and social goals? What would that look like?
I think I would ask people to start looking at what is their self-talk. So when they feel like they missed a goal or they failed at something, what's the language that goes on in their own head? And start paying attention to how you're talking to yourself. Often we're the most cruel to ourselves. We're much more compassionate to other people who might be failing a goal. And how do all of us begin to put compassion into the way we talk to ourselves when we don't meet a goal, and develop that self-compassion?
I like it. So self-talk, monitor your self-talk. Kara, how about for you, the 30-second big goals advice?
I would say I've had the most success with setting goals when I aimed really high and it was something that maybe seemed unrealistic to other people, but that I felt was something I could obtain, because I think having confidence in yourself and what you can do is one of the best indicators of whether you can achieve something. And so just aiming high, aiming for big things, and not being afraid, being courageous enough to do that because they're possible.
Great. Confidence. I like it. Ben, how about for you? What's that 30-second big goal advice?
Progress is not linear. Taking away, you can't achieve those big goals without failure, and taking away something from every failure you have should be eventually a step forward. Learn something from every time something doesn't go your way.
Great. And Leanne, how about you? That big goal advice, what is it?
Don't forget about your past big goals, because I think so often we forget that we achieved big goals before and now they seem small, but remember that you did it so that you can set those really big goals and know that you can get there.
That's awesome. Those are some great ones. Well, we're going to wrap up with a few minutes of questions. I have a few have come in through our Q&A for our participants. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in Q&A now. I've got a quick one to knock out. Ben, what's your favorite local trail to ride?
Favorite local trail? I would say it's probably Sanley Park down in near Sanford, which is, it's a little bit of a drive. If I were to say right here in Durham, Brumley Forest.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. We'll have to check that out. Another deeper question. As we've mentioned, there's a lot of angst right now with COVID. Many individuals have this feeling of hopelessness due to that pandemic and our racial climate. How do we build healthy habits despite this feeling of hopelessness and that there's all these challenges in our social environment? I'll let whoever wants to tackle that one, because this is a great one.
So Kim, I'll start just because I saw that right, I think before I answered one of the previous questions. And so when I was saying the be kind to yourself, I was thinking about that question. And so keep that in mind. But also, if we're feeling hopeless, is there something you can do to help with one of those, whether it be the racist pandemic going on or COVID? Is there some step that you can take that may help make a difference? That might make you feel better.
Yeah. So be active, right? So get involved. That's great. Anyone else want to tackle that one?
Yeah, to build off what Leanne is saying is if we're really feeling hopeless and we want some sense of hope, can we give hope to someone else? And really reach out to someone else who might be struggling more than we are even, and give them some sense of hope and belief.
Yeah, that's nice. Great. I have one more question I want to try to field here, because we spent a few minutes at the beginning talking about all you morning people out here. But what if you're not a morning person? How can you start your morning? Let me read this correctly. This individual says, I'm not a morning person. How do I start my day early and work out first thing in the morning despite not being a morning person? Is it caffeine? What's the trick if you're not a morning person?
Stop hitting the snooze button. Set your alarm for when you really want to get up, because all you're doing is messing your sleep cycle up. Yeah, I don't know. You kind of have to drag your butt out of bed the first few times and make a habit of it.
Yeah. And have something you look forward to in the morning. If it's like, oh, I got to go get on that elliptical and you hate the elliptical, then don't do it. Go do yoga. Go do something that you really look forward to in the morning that's going to motivate you to get up. These are some great questions coming in from our audience. We have a few more, but we're going to move on and we can go ahead and try to address those offline. But I wanted to thank all of our panelists for being here today and let you all know that this is the first in a series of RecTalks. So we'll have one each month, and you can find those themes each month by going to our Duke Rec and PE website and finding out who is also going to be on our panel for those future RecTalks. But I'm really appreciative of the panelists we have here today, and I look forward to seeing you around campus and around Durham to talk more about how we're coping with our healthy habits during this time of COVID and racial justice. I think that we all have a lot of challenges right now, and as much as we can support each other in trying to do self-care and maintain our health during these challenging times, it's going to be really important. So thanks again for being here, and let's make sure to keep in touch with each other and take care of each other, as you've all mentioned.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.